As a seasoned nurse, I had seen my fair share of patients come and go over the years, but none of them had ever left as much of an impression on me as Mr. Johnson did. He was a man in his mid-40s with a sharp mind and a quick wit that belied the seriousness of his condition. Mr. Johnson had been brought into the hospital by Dr. Smith, one of the most renowned neurosurgeons in the country. The doctor had been working tirelessly for hours to save Mr. Johnson's life after he had suffered a severe stroke that had left him paralyzed on half of his body. Despite the gravity of his situation, Mr. Johnson remained optimistic and determined to recover fully. As I watched him struggle to speak and move, I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for his strength and resilience. One day, while I was administering his medication, Dr. Smith came by to check on his progress. He smiled at me warmly before turning his attention to Mr. Johnson. "I have some good news and some bad news," he said, his voice filled with empathy. "What's the good news?" Mr. Johnson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The good news is that your scans look great," Dr. Smith replied. "Your brain has shown remarkable resilience and adaptability. However, there is still significant damage to the motor cortex, which means you will need to undergo surgery to repair it." Mr. Johnson nodded bravely, despite the fear and uncertainty etched on his face. "What's the bad news?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Dr. Smith hesitated for a moment before speaking. "The bad news is that the surgery carries risks. There is always a chance that you may not wake up from the anesthesia or that you may experience significant cognitive impairment afterwards." A heavy silence fell over the room as we all absorbed the weight of those words. Mr. Johnson looked at Dr. Smith pleadingly, his eyes searching for any glimmer of hope. "Will I be able to walk again?" he asked softly. Dr. Smith sighed deeply before answering. "We won't know until after the surgery. But I want you to understand that even if you do regain mobility, it may not be the same as before. You may need rehabilitation therapy to learn how to walk and move around again." As I watched Mr. Johnson process this information, I felt a lump in my throat. Despite everything he had been through, he still held on to hope like a lifeline. It was a powerful reminder of the human spirit and its ability to persevere in the face of adversity.